Welcome back to Nifty 50 Photographers. Now in today's video we're going to crack the code of creating fine art black and white photographs, and I've chosen a location where there's a particularly ugly building. Well, it's certainly very controversial. It's some brutalist architecture. It's the Fortin services on the M6 in Lancaster, and it's a hexagonal concrete tower. It's called the Pennine Tower. And it's a good example of brutalist architecture, so it fits nicely in with my fine art black and white photography project. And I'm using this as an example to try and create a beautiful photograph from something that would appear to be a terrible subject to choose. So the first thing I've done is have a scout around to try and find the best locations. So one of the ways I'm going to try and make this a beautiful photograph is to do a long exposure. And long exposures add a kind of surreal quality to it, and they add interest to your skies and things because the clouds will move across them. Now today we've got almost perfect conditions for that. We've got a blue sky, we've got some wind, and we've got some clouds, so they should move nicely across the scene. The other reason I want to do a long exposure is because of the traffic, and the traffic is going to be moving through the picture all the time. By doing a long exposure, then it'll help to make that less distracting to the photo. I've had a scout around and I found a couple of locations that I want to take a shot from. Now I've looked at 2 or 3 in total, but I've narrowed it down to these 2. Now the first one I've chosen is this one, which gives me quite a close-up shot of the main buildings, and I think that's interesting because we've got lots of different angles. I'm also thinking about how I process that because of the glass in this structure and the concrete tower and the contrast against the sky. I think this is the one that's going to give me the best opportunity. Now, getting a bit further away from the building, I found this second location. Now, in this location, what I'm thinking about is I'm going to take the photograph vertically, but in the final edit, I'm going to crop it to square. And the reason why I wanted to do that is in the foreground, there are a lot of white daisies growing by the side of the motorway. And I think they could add some interest in the bottom left-hand corner. They could help to balance the photo against the white of the concrete tower as well. So that's how I'm thinking about the composition for those photos. So I'm going to go out now, take the shots and see what we come up with. For my camera settings, I'm on a manual setting, so I'm using my bulb timer. I'm exposing for 300 seconds, so that's 5 minutes at f9 and an ISO of 100. And I'm using a 16 stop ND filter. Well, actually it's a combination of a 10 and a 6 stop. I've also got a circular polarizer fitted, which will help bring out a bit of contrast in the sky and the clouds. Now, when I've chosen these locations, besides the obvious consideration of my own personal safety and access to the site, I've also been looking at which way the sun is. I don't want to shoot straight into the sun for this shot, but I want the sun to cast interesting shadows and create tonal contrast in my image. The other thing I'm conscious of when you create black and white fine art images is the subject you choose. It should have some sort of meaning. It should have some context and reason why you want to take the photograph. For me, it's because of this brutalist architecture. The beauty of it is going to be something that divides people. You'll either love it or you'll hate it, I suspect. And that's one of the reasons to choose subjects like this. Right, I'm back in my studio, looking through my photos, and let's see what I've got. You can see I've taken 3 shots to establish which was the best location to take my long exposure shot from. And as you know, I narrowed that down to 2. And in the end, actually, I've only processed one of those. So let's look at the shot I went on to develop. Now that's this one here. So this is the long exposure shot I took. So the first thing you'll notice is all the traffic has disappeared. Great, that's just what I was looking for. I've got a little bit of movement in the clouds. Actually, although it was very windy on the ground, obviously higher up the clouds weren't moving terribly quickly, but they have put a lot of nice interest in the sky. There's a nice bit of light and dark which I can bring out in post-processing. The other thing you'll notice, because of the wind, my tripod was shaking and it's a little bit blurred. So the first thing I did was went ahead and I sharpened that in Topaz Sharpen. You can see how much sharper that looks in this photo. Now the next thing to go ahead and do with that is actually I just tidied up a few little items. So you'll see that I eliminated that rather irritating keep left arrow that was right in the foreground. I felt that was very distracting, and one of the other signs as well. So I've eliminated those. I think when I come to the end of this photo, I'm going to see what it looks like in black and white first, and then I'll probably have to take out all those traffic cones as well, because I think they'll be quite distracting. So my next thing is to read that into Photoshop. This is the photo opened up in Photoshop, and this is the one I'm going to use to convert to black and white. Now, before I convert it to black and white, I tend to do my selections because I find it easier to do that in color. Now, how I decide on my selections and how I process this, best covered in another video, and I'll leave a link to that up here somewhere so you can see my process. But basically, I'm deciding on my selections. I'll always select the sky, and then I'm going to select various aspects of the building, because I choose the ones that I know I need to work on, where I'm going to want to alter the lights and the darks in there. But one thing I should point out, when I select the sky, I start with the Photoshop default, so I let it, you choose this option of the select sky, which is on this menu here. What I do when I make a selection, I always save it as a new channel. And if you ask Photoshop to save the sky, you will end up with something like this. Now you can see there, the bits that are selected are white. The bits that aren't selected are black, and the ones that fall somewhere in between, where your actions will affect that bit of the image, are in these sort of mid-tone colors. And I don't want that. I want a clearly defined difference between the sky and the rest of the image. And I want the same for my other selections. So one of the things I do is I go and tidy all that up by painting black and white on that channel, so that I end up with something that looks like that. And once I've got that, I can use that then to create my other selections and select all the other buildings I want. I'll just scroll through and I'll show you what else I've selected. So inverse sky is pretty obvious, but I've also done things like parts of the building I want. So the tower, the block in the right hand side of the image, the building at the base of the tower, and the bridge over the motorway. And the last thing I do is I do some luminosity masks, and I do that using an action. And you can download these actions from various websites. I've got one from a lady called Juliana Gasparadou, I think that's how it's pronounced. She's a famous Greek fine art architectural photographer. You can find it's a free download on her website, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. It creates all these masks, and you'll see what it's creating is masks for shadows, masks for highlights, and masks for midtones. And so I can work separately on different areas of the photograph according to how bright or how dark they are. Once I've done that, I end up with my final image, which looks something like this. And the final thing I do is a little bit of tweaking in Lightroom. So let me show you what that looks in the final image in Lightroom. And that looks something like that if I show you what I've done in development. So I have taken out, you see here, I've taken out all those traffic cones because I felt they were distracting. I've done a little bit of tweaking on the exposure. I actually changed the profile. I chose one of the black and white profiles. You can see I've played with some of these sliders here just according to how I feel the image looks best. And the other main thing I tend to do is add a vignette to the outsides, and I nearly always go with a dark vignette rather than a white one because that's just my style. So that was the final image. I'm really pleased with how that came out. I think it's done justice to what I was trying to do with this project. And I'd love to see some of yours. So if you've tried this, taken what you think is not an attractive subject, turn it into a beautiful fine art photograph, why not share it in the comments and let others give you some feedback on how you've done. I'm finding I'm getting great results from doing long exposures and spending time really developing those into what I think is a fine art photograph. So have some fun with your camera, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.